Hello, everybody. Welcome to Profiling Evil Live. I'm Mike King, by the way, and it's great to be with you. I'm actually calling in from Dallas, Texas. I'm here for the International Chiefs of Police meetings with 15,000 of my closest friends from around the world. So uh, I'm calling from the hotel room. I hope the bandwidth's good. I hope the audio's good. Please let me know if you're hearing everything clearly and that everything is smoothly running across the screen. Got a shout out to a few folks right off the bat. First off, Wendy Henschel, who was the first person to sign on tonight and say hello. Thanks, Wendy. Ray Kelly, excuse me, former police commander and great guy. We're going to talk a little bit maybe tonight. Trish Norman is on. Ruth Ann, thanks. Ruth Chidley. It's great to see y'all. Becky L. Just really glad that you're jumping on. Paula Volter, good evening to you. Lori, hi, Mike and all. Or Lorna, I'm so sorry. Lorna McKenzie. Teresa Holder. Now listen tonight, folks. Again, thanks for letting me know it's loud and clear, that everything seems to be working right. Tonight, we're going to be talking about the serial killer over in Stockton. And I want you all to feel comfortable in calling in. I don't know if you caught this early on, but we're going to do something we did a few weeks ago. Everybody seemed to like it. So I'm going to try it again. I cut a video on the serial killer. I was going to post it up today, knowing that I was flying, not knowing what the hotel internet would be like. And I thought, as worst case scenario, I just post the video. Best case, we do it like we did before with the return to classroom kind of thought process to talk through the case. And so that's what we're going to do. Make sure you're firing in your questions. Super chats always get elevated just because they make the little banner colored and it jumps out. And above all, it's really appreciated when you're able to do that. And for those of you who cannot afford to do super chats or be a part of the membership programs, don't sweat it. It is so cool just having you subscribe and seeing our numbers slowly and organically grow. So thanks for sharing Profiling Evil with your friends and others. And I'm going to start looking for some questions now. So Jenny Hansen, so great to see you as well. Thanks a lot. And I love your door burglar alarm in the picture there. So great to see you. Teresa Holder jumped right out of the chutes. Thank you so much for that kind super chat, Teresa. And you know what? I just feel honored to have been able to serve. And I'm really lucky because I still get to meet with police commanders from around the world every single day as part of my day job. Every once in a while, I let you all know a little bit about my professional life outside of Profiling Evil. But Cynthia, thanks a lot. You're living close. Not sure which city you live in. Don't share it now since we just put your picture up. But thanks a lot. And again, folks, here's the deal. Tonight, I want you to ask questions. I'm going to try watching them. Believe it or not, my pride is getting better. I even threw on my glasses in case there's some things I can't read. So I'm going to be able to try to answer questions. We're going to just chat. We're going to show pieces of the video that I prepared and then stop. And I want you all to comment and share your thoughts and processes. So doesn't look like any questions are coming in other than not sure what this is. Larry Lioness, not a you. Thoughts on what's happening in Los Angeles, unless it has to do with some of the allegations against the police department, but I'm not exactly sure what you're asking about. So maybe send something else on that. And Cynthia Burke, thank you for that really kind comment. You're just very kind. So I may have missed something because I've been on a plane this afternoon, and there might be something happening that I'm not aware of. Now, there are a couple things happening in California, though, that are pretty interesting. The jury reconvenes tomorrow in the Kristen Smart case. And if you go back and see some of my videos on Kristen Smart back in the early days, this one's getting really interesting. And again, this is a no body murder case. And there are two suspects in the case. The actual accused killer, Paul Flores, and his father, who police are and prosecutors are alleging helped Paul dispose of Kristen's body. So apparently something big happening in LA. How many victims do they have in a suspect? Teresa, thanks for that kind donation. And again, I don't know. Maybe I'm missing something altogether. Southern Sass, great to see you. Thanks always for supporting me. So let's see. Here we go. Brinny says, "Hey Mike, I live super close to Stockton. I'm actually taking classes at SJDC right now in the middle of where a lot of these killings have happened." You know, I want to just say that we talk about victim risk and the victim risk continuum a lot on Profiling Evil. Go back and watch that video. Don't live in fear, but be wise. Think about decisions that you're making and where you're going, and think about what the impact might be. That's really the key to these kinds of things. When I see these major events happen, I'm not victim blaming, folks, but it really is clear to me how much we add to the increase in risk that we take in our daily lives. So just kind of keep that in mind. And Brittany, thank you. Appreciate me going live, she says. And you know what? I just don't do it very often. I just travel so much. And when I get home, I want to just kind of spend time with family. Celebrated a 4-year-old's birthday yesterday, had a blast, and just love being with my grandkids. And gosh, I have such neat kids, and they're such good parents, and that's really fulfilling. So anyway, here we go. Let's jump in, and let's start off first and go with this clip as we start to talk about the Stockton serial killer. And again, keep in mind, this is kind of what we did a couple of weeks ago. A lot of you said you really liked it, where we show a video, we show portions of a video, and then we stop and chat and answer questions. So some of this is canned and prepared, and the rest of it is just kind of live TV, and we'll see what happens. So thanks again. And I'm going to pop up this right here. What do you think about how AWP is being treated? It depends on what you're talking about, the negative treatment or the positive treatment. I think this has been a really good opportunity for Adventures with Purpose. In fact, I talked with Doug and Jared today. I think these are good opportunities for them to figure out where their swim lane is. And it's not in investigations, just like mine isn't in underwater recovery and sonar and all the things that they do so amazingly. I mean, they have recovered so many bodies that law enforcement's been unable to find. If you go back early on the Kylie Rodney case, you saw me saying that I thought that this was an accident, that there were mistakes made, and that there was victim risk that Kylie placed on herself. Now, there's things we don't know about this case, but again, we just all need to stay in our swim lanes. I'm helping the Adventures with Purpose team on a number of cases. I posted one earlier today on a missing man, and one just a few days ago last week on another missing person. On today, Adventures with Purpose released a video on another case that I helped them on. It's only to their channel members at this point, but on Friday morning, I'll have my investigation as part of a dive that they did on another case. So I love the guys. I love Jared. He's been a dear friend for a long time. I love Doug's enthusiasm, and Doug is just a good soul. They are good people. And heck, I've made so many mistakes in my career. I've goofed up so many investigations. let's just cut them a little slack as they kind of go and evolve and work through this. Hey, I want to bring in a buddy before we get rolling here. A former detective from up in Long Island. Ray, how you doing, brother?
Good, Mike. Good to see you.
Really good to see you.
You know,
Ray and I, folks, have had the chance to really talk seriously about a bunch of cases, including one that's really dear to our hearts, a family that we deeply love, the Wustenhoff family, and the murder of their father, a police officer. Ray's wearing his wristband. Dennis Wustenhoff was murdered 32 years now, Ray?
yeah.
Almost
Be
30 years.
32 years in February
Yeah.
15th. Yep.
And folks, I hope you'll go back and watch the program we did on Dennis's case, where we talked about the dynamics of the case, and make sure you're catching the Dr. Phil show that I did with the family, and the way in which Dr. Phil stepped up. I mean, the whole reason for that, Ray, was to put pressure on a new district attorney. What's going on in that case?
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, Mike, I'm very disappointed, to be honest with you. And they're investigating. You know, it's an active case. You know, I've been told years ago that they're worried about it being overturned on an appeal. So I guess they want to get all the ducks in a row. You know, the old saying goes, and when this guy gets convicted, they don't want it overturned on appeal. That's the bottom line.
Yeah, there you go.
I mean,
Well,
it's a very, very good circumstantial case, as you know.
oh, I'll tell you, and I'll tell you, you cannot but fall in love with those kids. And Fran, Dennis's wife, I just adore them all. And one of the sweetest parts of my day is when I get a text from them or a Facebook chat about something or another.
Well, you'll be one of the first to know if I hear anything and if there's an arrest made. That's for sure.
Well, and if that happens, I'll be probably the second one on a plane, because you'll be flying from Florida up, and I'll be flying from the West Coast on up to be with that family as that comes about. That's been an honor to be able to work with them.
Well,
So, Ray,
you were very instrumental, and I got to say thank you, Mike. You were very instrumental in getting that case featured on Dr. Phil, and that really gave the case a lot of exposure. Really, you know. So
oh
thank
yeah,
you
well,
again.
Dr. Phil has been so good to me, and a lot of people chip in once in a while, and they don't like some of the shows that come on, but I've been on there, I think, 6 times, and I've never had a case, Ray, that if there was something that I felt needed to remain quiet and stay with law enforcement rather than hit the news media or the airwaves, 100% behind it. He is top drawer, in my opinion.
No doubt about it. And you were talking about adventures with purpose too. I know you want to get on to the Stockton case, but I got to take my hat off to Adventures with Purpose, really, because those guys are amazing. That's where I found out about your show, because I was watching their show when you were on it.
That's right.
Way back when. And, they do amazing work, and they've recovered a lot of missing people. So you got to give them a lot of credit.
Oh yeah, and you know what? This is a perfect time for me to ask. And Michelle Morris, thanks. I don't know if you've met Michelle, Ray, but a lawyer out of Texas, amazing woman. Father was a police officer. In fact, one of the shows I did on Profiling Evil, and folks, go back and watch this, was a serial killer read bedtime stories to me, and that was Michelle Morris as a child being read by a serial killer when her father brought this rascal home after pulling him out of jail to go show him where he buried some bodies. And I know you've been a part of those kinds of investigations, but here's the question I got for you. We're going to stay on the Adventures with Purpose theme for just a second here. How many mistakes did you make as an investigator, Ray?
Yeah, you make mistakes. There's no doubt about it. Nobody's perfect, but you do the best you can. You really do, or at least I did. I did the best I could.
Yeah, nope, that's it. And so, you know what? I think the biggest mistake is failure to act. I have made so many darn mistakes, but I've never been afraid to make a decision and then learn from that decision. And when you're doing investigations, you learn a lot of really painful lessons in the early years of being a detective and trying to understand behavior, trying to separate emotion from fact, all of that. So I just think it's so important that we all kind of figure out what our swim lane is. I don't try to talk about brain surgery, and but I do still kind of talk a little bit about law enforcement.
Yeah. Well, it's a tough job, and I feel bad for the officers today. They're not really getting the support that they need. You know, and then again, you talk about police leadership. Some of the police leaders, what a good way to put it is, they got to back their police officers too.
Boy, you're not kidding. In fact, tomorrow morning, I'm going to be in a meeting with a bunch of police chiefs where they're going to be talking about retention and how to keep cops enthused about the job, because I think they've been bumped and bruised quite a bit. But we're gonna let that go for another day. Ray, hey, tell everybody about Captain Ray Kelly, your channel with drones, because what you've been doing with drones, I just love watching your channel. And folks, make sure you're going over to Ray's channel and subscribing. But I got to know, number one, if you actually swam in the ocean to get that drone you guys crashed a couple of days ago, or who did the dirty work there?
Yeah, well, I didn't go in the water the day it happened, but I went in a few weeks later and I tried to find it. Yes. But it wasn't the ocean, it was the intercoastal waterway in Jensen Beach, Florida. And I did not find it.
Well, thanks so much. And hey, shouting out to Duty Ron. Ron and I have such a great relationship. I hope you folks, you're subscribing to Duty Ron. I love chatting with Ron and Ed and discussing cases. Even a couple of days ago, we were kind of bantering back and forth on a case where we had differing opinions. And I think that's probably the most invaluable thing. When I had a major case, I didn't want people that agreed with me. I wanted people that disagreed with me. What are your thoughts on that?
No, it's good to have a difference of opinion. There's no doubt about it, because, you could be looking in the wrong direction. A lot of time. I mean, when I worked on the Katie Beers case, let's just say, there were about 50 detectives working on that case, and some guys had this theory, some guys had that theory, and we thought we were looking for a dead body, and we kept the pressure on the family. And
yeah, and folks,
we didn't get a dead body. We got a live body. We got her back after 17 days.
That's right, folks. If you haven't read up on the Katie Beers case, maybe that's one, Ray, we ought to just do in another week or two. We ought to just get on and chat about Katie Beers case. Because, folks, this is the guy who went in and found this child and brought her to the hospital after 17 days of being abducted. And Ray, hats off to you, because those kind of cases you never quit thinking about, but the ones that you never solve are the ones that really haunt you, aren't they?
I know they do. There's no doubt about it. You'd think about them years later, even after you retired.
Yeah. Well, hey, Ray, do me a favor, stick the link to your channel in the chat box. I'll make sure I pop it up. Please tell everyone where it is, and thanks so much for jumping on. I hope you're eating lots of Cuban food down there right now.
Yeah, well, I'm in New York now. I don't go to Florida until November 15th for the winter.
Okay.
So I'm on Long Island. So I'm flying drones up here right now.
All right. Well,
it's just my name, Ray Kelly. Adventures with Captain Ray Kelly. I'll pop it right to the top.
Perfect.
But, yeah. And
a big
thing, Mike, too, is we try to get children involved in learning how to fly drones. So if you know any children, tell them to get in touch with us, and we'll put them in touch with the right people in their area to teach them how to fly drones.
I was speaking at an international conference last week in Mexico, and part of the topic was how we've taken drones and we fly them along the rail lines as a normal patrol pattern because of all of the piracy that's occurring on the rail line.
Right.
And I'll tell you, there's just so much that can be done in this area. So anyway, thanks a lot, buddy. It's great to talk to you. Have a good night.
All right. Thanks a lot, Mike.
You bet. Thank you. And folks, if somebody out there wants to jump on and say hi, we're just kind of we're just spitballing our way through this thing tonight. And it would be wonderful to have you jump on and ask a question. Erica Hall says that look in Jennifer Short, her parents were murdered in Martinville, Virginia. Great. Erica, if you have a case that you think would be interesting for us to tackle, just send it to profilingevil.com. Go into the evidence room. The more information you put in there, the better chance you have of that thing getting some airtime. So please consider doing that. Now, let's just take a few minutes. Let's jump into the first segment of this video, and we'll get back and chat a little more. So save up your questions.
I didn't want to move my legs anymore, so I was moving my arm, and I was yelling and screaming for help. And like I said, I'm very familiar with the area. I knew nobody was going to hear me, and the people that were hearing me weren't responding. Unprovoked, no robbery, no words, no nothing. It was I had one more call left, so I called Jesus.
The Stockton serial killer shot her 10 times. Leaving her dying near the train tracks. And she pled for help, but nobody called 911. How on earth did this woman survive, and what evidence is tying her victimization to a predator police now say has killed 6 other people? Let's talk about the serial killer in Stockton, California. Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to Profiling Evil, and thank you for watching this video on the serial killer out of Stockton, California. I hope that you'll take a moment and hit that like and subscribe button, and make sure you're ringing the bell so that you get all of our notifications. Now, I'm doing this video because you asked for it. I mean, I can't believe how many people have asked me to weigh in on this case, and so at your request, I'm going to do it. Stockton police are taking quite a beating from the true crime community and, frankly, the greater Stockton community because this killer is still on the loose. Man, folks, these are tough cases. And sadly, serial killer cases usually only get solved after the victim numbers climb higher and higher and higher. You got to think about this. This predator, this kind of predator, especially if they've gotten away with this numerous times, is learning and evolving. The predator is meticulous, cunning, and skillful at committing violent crime. And frankly, this predator is particularly good at being bad. So let's take a few moments and look at the 5 primary victims in the Stockton area. And I want to start by looking at this map, which shows the location where the 5 men have been shot since July of 2022. Now, pay really close attention to this map that I've created that shows that the victims were all shot within 3.6 square miles of each other. Now, that distance can be cut down to about 2.3 square miles if we get right down to the exact locations, and all of them are within about 9 minutes of each other. That is an incredibly small geographic area. And I want to point out a couple other things as we're talking here, because there was a 6th victim in the Stockton area, a woman that we're going to talk about. And the case here is kind of interesting. So what I've done is I've done a little bit of, we call it geoprocessing around the scene to kind of see if there are some similarities or some things that help us geographically profile this offender, not only behaviorally profile him, but geographically profile him. So the first thing is each of these red points indicate where a victim was killed or shot in the case of the one woman. Now, the woman was the one at the very bottom of the screen that we're looking at. The other victims, the 5, are within that small 2.3 square mile geographic area that we're talking about. The first thing that I wanted to do is think about the possibility of how this predator might be moving around, because we do know he came from Oakland over to Stockton, some 60 miles away. But now he's in the area. How is he moving from point A to point B? If it's a vehicle, then 2.3 is a really small area to be driving in. First thing I did is I created a 1-minute buffer. That big sign that says Mike is muted actually means something. I want to stop there for just a moment to just talk about a couple of things that were happening here. I think it's really important to recognize such a small area where these offenses are occurring. And we're going to talk a little more about this offender and some of the behavioral characteristics of who they are and what personality characteristics we're starting to see in this case as we go in. But I just had a special friend jump in. I want to say hi to her, so I'm going to bring her in. Trisha Griffith, how are you?
I'm great. I look like I've put my head in a blender, and I actually did. New hairdo I have, but I'm doing great, running around like crazy, but all is well, Mike, and I appreciate the invite. Thank you very much.
Well, how can I come to Dallas and not call up Web Sleuths and say hello and tell me what you're doing?
Oh, you are so kind. Well, we actually have a couple of really big shows this week. On Saturday, on our Woo Woo Saturday night, that's where we talk ghost stories. We are having the people on from the hidden and forgotten YouTube stream. This is where Mr. Ron Carlson goes around and tells true crime stories, and he visits the graves of the victims. He is also starting a paranormal channel with his partner named Britton, and it's going to be amazing. So they're coming on what we call Woo Woo Saturday night. That's where we talk about ghost stories. And then on Tuesday, Mike, I'm so excited, Mike Rinder from Scientology. He is the
awesome.
Yes, he is the highest official that has escaped Scientology, and he's written a new book. And we're going to be talking to him on Tuesday. So lots going on. I have Scrappy Joe here, and let's see, there's Scrappy, and right behind me, you can't see him, but that is Othram, after Othram Labs, Tex Bug Nugget the first. He has no papers, but he's just cute. We love him.
Well, so folks, make sure you're checking out Trisha's channel. She is a dear friend, and I have just loved watching that channel grow, because it is growing, Trisha, and you're working really hard. I know that you have been in Dallas now for a couple of years, but I want to take you back over to the West Coast for a minute.
Sure.
And tell me what your thoughts are about and what you're hearing on Web Sleuths in regard to the close proximity of the 5 victims from 2022 in the Stockton serial case.
Stockton.
Because the outliers are going to be everything that happened up until that 448 days before victim number 3 happened.
Right. Well, the thing that everybody is talking about, of course, is the fact, sorry, dogs are having a fight, normal night in the Griffith household. Everybody's, I shouldn't say everybody, but most people on Web Sleuths are coming to the same conclusion that you are, Mike, or I think you are, and that is this has got to be a serial killer. They have to look at it and decide, okay, when do we actually step up and say we have a serial killer in our midst? And I think they need to do that as quickly as possible. I don't know if they have formed a task force yet. Do you know that? Hey, guys, be nice. Do you know if they formed a task force?
Well, I'm sure that they have a task force of sorts in place, but make no mistake about it, folks. Now that they've ballistically tied the 7 victims together, that cool down period is what differentiates this from a mass shooting or a spree shooting or anything else. So this is a serial killer, or it's a really coordinated weapon that's moving from person to person. So we got to be, we got to have some common sense here. And the bottom line is it's the same killer because that weapon isn't being transferred and moved around on rental.
No. And refresh my memory. What do the victims have in common, if anything?
Well, I'm going to cover that in a minute in
Oh,
the
okay.
video, so we'll stay with that. But
Sure.
ethnicity is really going to be an interesting piece of this. But you know
Hmm.
what? Sometimes people get all spun up about that, and we forget that we have to look at the demographic of the area. And so that's why geographic profiling is so important in addition to behavioral profiling. You know, we used to get all spun up in years ago when Ressler and Douglas were talking about the kinds of predators that were selecting their victims. They usually selected someone that was the same race as them. Well,
Right.
you have to think about it. These predators have to blend into the community. Otherwise, somebody's going to be calling and saying, why is this person in my community? So
Right.
kind of, I don't know. I just keep wanting to kind of dummy things down and say, let's not make it bigger than it is. It might just make good sense. And
Exactly.
so I personally am going to go out on a limb and say I'm going to be really surprised if the offender isn't Latino.
Mhm.
And that's interesting because a weapon of this grade is interesting. But I'm going to talk a little more about that
Sure.
in a couple of minutes. But it's going to be an interesting one. And Trisha, I can't tell you enough how much I appreciate
Oh, you're
the
kidding
effort
me.
that you put into the true crime community, the work that you do. To your database is second to none. So thanks for the effort you do and
Hey,
all the people that you have. I've called on Trisha folks on many occasions and said, I need some research done on a case. And I've gotten back a bucket load of stuff that I could then take advantage of. So thanks, Trisha.
you're welcome, welcome, Mike. And I can't take credit for that. It is our wonderful members and our moderators that keeps everybody in line, and we don't let the crazies in to go nuts. And it's our members. They are fascinating. I just sit back and make sure that the wheels are well oiled and everything runs smoothly. That's the best thing I can do is stay out of their way. So, and
Well,
Mike, I got to say thank you. You have been such a great support and a wonderful friend, and I really do appreciate you.
oh, well, thank you, Tricia. I'm going to make sure while I'm here, there's a little gas station just south of the Dallas Police Department that has some of the best barbecue on the planet. So
Ooh,
I'll be heading over there tomorrow night after some meetings. And folks, if you're in Dallas, thanks for the hospitality. I love coming here. The police chiefs that have been here have been people that I've really respected, and if you remember, it wasn't too long ago they lost police officers here,
a lot,
and
many,
uh, and
yes.
so hats off to all the people that serve here. But thanks, Tricia. Have a great
Thank
evening.
you. I'm going to watch the show and learn a lot, I'm sure. Thank you for inviting me, Mike. I can't thank you enough. Hi, everybody in chat. Thanks for all your support, and we'll see you soon. Okay.
Hey, Tricia, make sure you put Web Sleuth's link in the chat so that the people are seeing
Absolutely.
it. All
I'll
right,
do it.
thanks, Tricia.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
What a delight she is. Well, folks, I want to just take a second and jump over and look at a map to kind of recap some of the things that we were talking about here. And again, the thing that's important about this map that I want to bring out, Natasha Latour was the woman who was shot 448 days before victim number 3. And we're going to talk a little bit more about her. The only female that's been shot in this murder case thus far. But again, there's a process going on right now where law enforcement is looking at the NIBRS, which is the national, well, it's the registry for all forensics in relationship to weapons and bullets and casings. And that's how they're tying these cases together. But I'm just getting ready to cover something that I think is kind of interesting. And I wanted to do that. As part of the analysis that I've been doing, I created this dashboard that we're looking at. And I thought, if this guy is driving a vehicle, we have to kind of consider what the options are in this particular case. So the first thing I did is I took the recent 5 and I added Natasha. And the reason why I'm not including the victim who was murdered in Oakland is because of the distance and the fact that they're not tying other Oakland cases. Now, we may find that this suspect is migrating back and forth between Oakland and Stockton. that could be the case, but chances are what's going on is now focused in the Stockton area, if this killer is even still in the area. And I want to talk about that a little further. But as we did this, I'm looking over at, I got the hotel monitor TV in my room that I'm using for the map so I can kind of keep track of what I've done here. I've created these 1-minute zones where a suspect could drive a car at 3 o'clock in the morning from the location of that shooting, how far that suspect could get in a 1-minute period of time. And you'll see that it leaves some pretty small geographic regions here to consider. Now, the reason why this is so important is because, again, think about a suspect driving a vehicle. Their ability to get further away from home and commit a crime and get back undetected is greater than them taking the risk of driving in their own neighborhood where people are going to remember that car or spot it. But in addition to that 1-minute period of time, I created then a 3-minute drive time to show how far they can get. And now we start to see a centroid or a location where there are commonalities, where it would be easy to get from point A to point B. If we jump up to a 5-minute period of time, then of course that area gets much bigger. But this is based on a 3 a.m. drive time, because many of these murders, excluding one that happened at almost 10 p.m., many of these murders happen between midnight and 6 a.m. And so I'm trying to keep it on. Now we're gonna come back to this map in just a minute, but I want to continue on the video. But first, I'm going to take a moment and look at a couple of questions and see what you might be saying there. Let's see. Here we got Coach Carlin. That's exactly where I was starting with Geo. The person knows the area or is attached in some manner. And yeah, that's a really important part that we have to consider in these kinds of cases, is what's the relationship? What was it that caused this offender to flee Oakland, or was he just visiting it and has always been in the Stockton area? Sometimes we'll see offenders that will step outside of their area of comfort to commit a major crime like this so that they can distance themselves. But usually what we see are these killers that want to try to be able to keep in contact with what the media is saying and everything else. So let's see. Here's another one. It's the same killer in Oakland. Yeah, thanks, Rose. Yes, that ballistically, the victim in Oakland has been tied to the victims in Stockton. The difference is the time difference, and we're not seeing more Oakland cases pop up. Hey, I want to invite a friend of mine on for a moment. I think you all know Duty Ron, and Ron, so great that you take a minute and jump on with me. How are you doing tonight?
Mike, it's a pleasure always to be in with you. I'm doing really well. Hey, I just wanted to pop on quickly because I know you got return to classroom, right? It's happening right now. I want to thank you for the great coverage that you do on all of these cases. You give both sides of the coin. You give the police perspective, you give your own personal perspective, and I love that, Mike. So kudos to you. This is a complicated case here, these shootings. You know, homeless men, four victims were homeless, 5 of them are male Hispanics. You got a lot to talk about here tonight, but I just wanted to pop in and say hi. Well,
thanks, Ron. You've been covering some really cool cases, and folks, I just want you to know there's a real, especially with the channels that are former law enforcement. I mean, we get on and we argue about things, and I love the fact that we don't agree. I don't know. How do you feel about that, Ron?
Yeah, like you said earlier, it's good to disagree and challenge each other. We have a lot of experience. We have a lot of knowledge. It's great to bounce ideas off of each other. And, you know, we could be going in one direction. And this was what was great about working in the squad. You know, in the NYPD, there's just so many members of the service. And you always were bouncing ideas off each other's. And you had commanders giving you ideas. You had the gumshoe detectives that were out there pounding the pavement. And then you have guys like Ed Wallace that would supplement us with all the crime scene stuff. So it's always a great balance when you have folks questioning each other from the same field. It helps to keep you not narrow-minded, but wide. You got a wide range of view, so to speak.
It absolutely is. I remember during the early days of Apple, Steve, what was his last name?
Steve Jobs.
Steve Jobs. Holy cow. How do I forget that? I'm having a senior moment. Steve Jobs said, if I hire people that think like me, I'm making the wrong decision. I got to have people that are thinking differently, because that's where we then defend our positions. We solve the questions. We ask more questions. That's what I love so much about geography as part of criminal investigations too, is it causes us to ask questions and brings some sense. And when you look at this particular case, Ron, 5 people within 2.3 miles.
Yeah, that map and that radius, the radius that they show on that map is just incredible, and it gives you a lot. You had that up before. Yeah, there it is. I have it up on my second monitor over here, and it really gives you a good overview on what was happening in this killer's mindset. He's staying close into this 4-mile radius, and then he expands out.
Yeah, there you go. And I'll tell you, my gut. Now, I've done geographic profiling for a long time. I understand criminal profiling. I understand investigative. But here's a couple of interesting things. I just personally, when I look at this, don't believe that this offender's driving a car. I think it's too risky to drive in a 2-mile radius. And so then the question becomes, is it possible that he's driving or taking the rail lines? Obviously possible. So I pulled in the rail lines here, and the rail lines, man, we know that Natasha Latour was sitting next to the rail lines when she was shot 10 times.
Right.
You can't discount that.
Right. Transient and homeless folks do tend to stay close to rail lines.
Exactly. So, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that, but then you start looking at this thing and you think, this means that the guy would have to jump off the train and hump it across town and pick the right house, versus picking a home right next to the train yard, kind of like Robert Ben Rhodes used to do with his truck. He only took victims that were near the freeway where he could get back on and get back inside. Yeah, but I want you just to look at that for just a second and tell me how likely you think it is this guy's riding a rail.
I think it's a strong possibility, and we'd always want to look at the rail system. I know here in New York City, we were criticized recently because the video and the video and audio surveillance inside the subway station, inside the stations, were not working. They were defective. So we would like to look here, and I'm sure the authorities in California, they're looking to see what type of security surveillance are in their public transportation system. Is there also a bus system along that route? Because a bus too is an easy place to jump on and take.
So let me stop you right there, Spider-Man. And so that's the next thing I wanted to look at, was where the bus routes are in that area. And now this picture really starts getting interesting, doesn't it?
Oh, sure.
And I'm going to play the video and talk a little bit more about that. But as consistent with many urban areas, there's lots of bus stops. So you can't just assume that means killers riding the bus. But I thought it was interesting to not only bring that data in, but then also bring in the location of every bus stop in that San Joaquin bus system. So I think your spider senses are right on, and something that needs to continue to be explored in this case. I'm going to actually hit some of those points as I get the video going again. But Ron, I tell you what, I love you. Thanks so much for being a part of my life.
Likewise. I mean, Mike, when you first started out with Profiling Evil, I think I was one of the first people that you asked the questions like, hey, how does this work? And I was so honored that you came to me, and our relationship, our friendship has grown since then. And I admire everything that you do. Mapping Evil, for the folks who are old timers here that have been from the beginning. I mean, that Mapping Evil, what you were doing there with that, with Suzanne Morphew and watching the movements of the searchers and things of that nature. And I even loved what you did with the Long Island serial killer, that map and all the things that you create in your team. I know you got a team behind every good man. There's a team, right? So just awesome stuff. The viewers are so smart here. They're educated, and I think Ed and I are doing the same thing over on Crime Time with Duty Ron. We're educating folks the best that we can on how it happens, how these investigations go. And I didn't know anything of what you put together here tonight. And here we are talking about subways and public transportation. It's just what detectives do, you know?
Pretty amazing. Everybody, make sure you're subscribing to Duty Ron. And Ron, stop back in, would you?
Thanks for allowing me to jump in for a few minutes. And hello to everybody in the chat. All
Thanks,
right.
Ron.
Take care. Good night.
Y'all. More Blazer Rage says, hey, has a serial killer ever changed their demographic? If the police find the murdered person that is not Hispanic, how would the police determine it's a serial killer or not? I think the weapon is going to be the primary thing that ties them back, whether they've collected any kind of forensics off of recovered bullet casings. That's going to be an interesting thing. But yes, absolutely. Criminals have changed their location and their demographic when they've had to. We call that in the profiling world getting a substitute victim. It's not the preferential victim that they want. It is a substitute, a stage prop, so to speak. And we're going to talk a little more about that. So let's jump back into the video. And some of this is a little bit repetitive. And then while it's playing, I want to see if you like this style of doing things. I asked once before, and that's why I'm back doing it again. But give me a little bit of a critique as we jump back into this video. Drive time from the point of each of these homicides. Now it shows here, and you can see those are small, relatively small geographic areas that represent that 1 minute drive time. So the minute he jumps in the car and starts driving away from those murders, how far can he get in 1 minute? And I'm using 3 a.m. as kind of a standard across the board to look at these, because these murders, one happened at 9 p.m., one happened at 6 a.m., but the rest are in those midnight to 4 or 5 a.m. Time frames. Now, the next one, this image shows not only that 1 minute drive time area, but a 3 minute drive time area. And now we see that some of those areas are starting to encroach on others. And then finally, I did a 5 minute drive time area that shows the possibilities of places that this offender could get in a relatively short amount of time if he was driving. And again, we don't know if he was driving, but what we can start to do geographically is look at the area and try to understand where might this offender be going that is going to reach out. And generally, they're predators that are working in the area where they stay. Now, here's another thing that I did that was kind of interesting. I brought in the railroad lines just to get a sense of where the railroad. And again, folks, sorry, this is a little repetitive to what Ron and I covered. And the rail line does go relatively close to many of these victims. We know one for sure, Natasha Latour, the murder was attempted right next to a railroad line. So we got to consider that. But what about bus lines? And could this predator possibly be using the metro system? So I plotted out the route of the bus lines in the area. And more importantly, I plotted out where all of the bus stops are. And all of a sudden we start seeing a really easy way for this predator to move in and out of the area if he happens to be transient in nature versus living in the area where he's running. Now, before we concentrate on these most recent murders, though, it's important that we go back 18 months and we travel 52 miles as the bird flies to the west, to the city of Oakland, California. Now, Oakland, for those of you who aren't familiar, is on the east side of San Francisco, across San Francisco Bay. So the east side of the bay. The area that we're really interested in, though, is a neighborhood that's known as Seminary. Now, this is an intriguing place, and it kind of plays into this in an interesting way. You see, Seminary is named after Mills College, and many people in the area still refer to that area as the Young Ladies Seminary. Now, there are efforts underway to change the name to names like Heartlands or Baja Maxwell Park, Lower Millsmont, but the long-timers in the area are fighting against it, saying it's all just part of the city's attempt at gentrification. I don't know. But this I do know, the killing spree started in an area that many people, including Wikipedia, by the way, call the killing zone or the kill zone because of all the violence that happens down in that area. That's where the first victim that we know has been tied to this case. That name is chilling and kind of fitting. You see, at 4:18 a.m. on April 10th, 2021, 18 months ago, this predator, now known as the Stockton serial killer, shot and killed a 39-year-old man named Juan Valdez Serrano. The call initially came in as a Shot Spotter call. Now, Shot Spotter is a company that I've worked with, and what they do is they put sensors throughout the city, and those sensors just listen for the sound of gunshots. The sensors are so sophisticated that they can actually tell, in most cases, the difference between a car backfiring or fireworks and the sound of a gunshot. When the gunshot report came in, police responded to the scene where they found the victim with multiple gunshot wounds. He died at the scene, and that case remained unsolved. It would only be 4 days, April 16th, 2021, at 3:20 in the morning when Natasha Latour was shot 10 times by this predator. Miraculously, she survived the shooting. And I thought, rather than me explaining it, let's just listen to her talking to this reporter about the assault and pay close attention to the description that she gives of the predator, the way he shoots the weapon that he had, and the realistic environment that homeless people sometimes face when they're injured or they need police. Let's watch.
Okay, well, I was homeless at the time, and I was, a drug addict. I mean, I still am, but I'm recovered now, and I was in my normal everyday life. I went to my storage unit, and then I got dressed and changed, and then I went and bought a brand new sweater, and then I went over to Park and Union, the railroad tracks, a place where I always used to go, and it was about 2:30, 3:30 in the morning, and the train sound came, so I knew a train was going to be coming, and then the train started to come towards me. I mean, I was on the side, and then a man came around the corner, or whoever came around the corner, and they already had the gun out, and they just started shooting.
What at that moment, what caught your attention to turn around and see the person pointing a gun at you?
So I was standing sideways towards the bushes, away from traffic, and it's the one way, and I heard like gravel. It was before the train was rolling.
Well, this case remained unsolved until law enforcement finally tied those first two cases to the 5 homicides that have occurred in the last month. They did it through comparing ballistics, or in other words, forensically tying the bullets and possibly the shell casings found at the different scenes back to the same firearm, and thus, theoretically, the same killer. Now, the police chief got on the news and said killer or killers. More likely that it's a killer. I want to stop for just a moment as I'm reading some of the chats. I want to maybe add some context for you to consider as you're coming up with theories about things. Number one, many of you are saying that he probably mistook her for a man, and I agree. We're going to talk about that a little bit in just a moment, but I want to talk about the progression that a serial killer goes through. They actually evolve and get better at their trade as time goes on, unless they are becoming disorganized, and we see that happen with some predators where they become disorganized and their planning gets worse. But I think it's really important to think about the victim selection in the early days versus today. And that's why I continue to hold victim number 1 and 2 as outliers, where now we see 5 victims since July that are really similar in their ethnicity, in their ages. There's one outlier there, in the environment. But think about a predator who's been fantasizing about wanting to take a life and building up the courage to go out and commit this homicide. It makes really good sense to me that they might travel to a different location to commit that first crime, to get away, to symbolically wash their hands of it and kind of separate them, because they don't know how it's going to work out. And we're going to talk about the length of time, 448 days between victim number 1 and victim number 2. But then it's all about success to these offenders. They don't want to get caught. They want to be successful. So in the initial stages, you can't put too much behavior about what their preferential victim is and what their motivation is in those initial stages, because they're looking for an easy mark, something that they can quickly do, something they can get away with as part of this. And then as they become better at this, then they start hunting, and then it becomes more sport as part of all of this. Let's jump back into this, but let me just stop and look at a couple of your thoughts there. Summer, we're going to talk about when that last victim came and the significance of that last victim. There many folks in the Stockton area are on hard times and aren't taking safety precautions. Really interesting comment. We're going to talk about this, Alicia, what would cause such a long cooling off period. This is really significant, and I've got some theories on that. Some of them make perfect sense, but we're gonna chat a little bit about that as well as this video continues. So let's hop back in. There were a couple of things that I thought were really interesting in what Latour's description of this suspect and what happened surrounded. So I want to just talk about those for a minute.
I described him. Okay, so the same way that I described him to the police way back in April. Actually, the first time I spoke with the police was in May. So he had on dark-colored pants, not black, but dark-colored pants. I don't know if they were jeans or sweat material. He had an open hoodie that was either navy blue or black, and he had a COVID mask on that was worn like perfectly, and it went across the bridge of his nose right over here. I didn't see the ear part. And so the top part of the hood was like fitted, kind of, but then like loose. It looked like the damn Unabomber, man. It looked like the Unabomber, except for without the glasses. I mean, and the sweater was unzipped, so it looked like he just threw it on, like he was gonna go do something real quick. I mean, so if he was to run, then it would come off his head.
Okay.
I think it was a male. I'm not sure. I mean, he was taller than me, and I don't know, what am I? I'm 5'6", I think. He's taller than me.
So I'm 6 feet. Would you say my height, about my height? Shorter?
About your height.
Okay.
Yeah, about your height. But then when I went down like this, and then he went down, then we were the same height.
Okay.
So and then after that, like I fell to the ground, and the train was passing. You know what I mean? And I was about 50 yards in, and because I wanted to lay down, I just wanted to go to sleep. I mean, there's a burning it's incredible. You're wet all over. You don't know why you're wet. But I was really happy that my legs moved. But every time I moved my legs, I was getting wetter and wetter, and I knew I was dying. You know, I mean, I was asking people for help that were there, not visible, but they were there because their camp was there.
They were there in their tents at the time along the fence line.
Yeah, further down, like another 50 yards down.
Okay.
But I don't expect. I mean, that they heard anything. But when a train leaves anywhere, any city, any town, it's dead silent. Mm-hmm. And they heard me asking for help, and they later on apologized. I know it's scary. You can keep yourself out of harm's way, but please call 911. I'm dying. and there was no response. And you know there's no response because you don't hear any sirens.
I don't know if you picked this up as she was talking, but she described the shooting that it occurred at the same moment a train passed by. To me, this is an indication of the predator's experience level, that he is potentially using the environment to successfully commit this crime. We call this modus operandi. And in this case, the sound of that train passing could have muffled the sound of gunshots. Now, it really makes me want to know more about the areas in which these other victims were discovered and if there were loud noise distractions in the same areas. Now, some of them were near apartment complexes and on city streets, so it's less likely. But again, this predator took advantage of the environment, or it was just plain dumb luck. But I think it's an indication that the predator is selecting locations that ensure he's going to be successful in this case. Another interesting behavioral characteristic that I picked up was the way in which Latour indicated the predator held the weapon. At one point, she actually showed us the weapon being turned at a 90-degree angle, much like you'd see a gangster image or a street thug image. It certainly isn't the way that a soldier, a police officer, or someone who has traditional firearms training would hold the weapon. Now, that said, it's really interesting to me, though, because she indicated that when she dropped to the ground to avoid gunshots, the predator also dropped to one knee and then placed both hands on the weapon, shooting from a more traditional firearm stance. Another really important point that I saw in both the first two shootings was that there's no indication that this predator had an intimate relationship with either of those victims. In fact, with all 7 that I've been able to see. Rather, it appears that the victims happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time, a stage prop, so to speak. But that doesn't mean that it wasn't a victim selection process going on, that offender wasn't picking a particular victim. What's going to be really interesting is to continue examining this case more closely and thinking about that victim selection process. Now, and thinking along these lines for a moment, stop, because 6 of the victims have been male, while the 7th, Latour, is clearly a female. Now, take what I'm saying with a grain of salt, and I'm not being judgmental in any way, but I want to point out how short Latour's hair is in this video that she just did. If she was wearing her hair in the same kind of style 18 months ago, in my opinion, it's highly likely that the offender might have mistaken her for a male person in the low light conditions of that early morning hour. And that leads me to the other behavioral characteristics that I think are worth noting at this point, and that is the majority of the victims are Latino. Now, Latour is African American. Most of the victims are over 45 years and younger than 60. It's a pretty small range, but one was 21 years old. All of that are kind of interesting, but here's something that's consistent. They all appear to be homeless, or they all appear to be at least hanging out in an area or happen to be in the wrong place at the wrong time where homeless people are residing. Now, without digging deeply into each of their backgrounds, it could just be that they are victims who happen to be passing through the wrong place at the wrong time. But as I'm looking into this, I'm thinking it's more targeted than that. And this continues to cause me to wonder if this predator isn't selecting homeless people. The purpose could be something as self-righteous as he feels like he's ridding society of people in that position. I don't know. But before I go on much longer, let's just take a look at the 5 victims who have been killed since July of 2022. Again, remember, 18 months passed by. And just to remind you folks, we're talking about the serial killer case in Stockton, California. I'm looking into this case because so many of you have emailed me asking my thoughts on the case and how it's unfolding. But before we get back to the case, I want to take a moment and ask you to consider picking up a couple of my books. Many of you have already done so, and I want to thank you so much. But I want to encourage the rest of you to think about them, perhaps even as something like a Christmas gift as the Christmas season comes up. Now, the first book is a book called She Knew No Fear. It's about Jane McKechnie Walton, I think one of the most incredible women I've ever known. She was murdered on July 24th, 1891. So if you like stories about people emigrating to the United States, walking across the plains, living the frontier life, this might be the book for you. I became interested in this murder because Jane was my great-great-grandmother. Yeah, I'd heard all about her murder my entire life, and just before I retired, I decided that I was going to try to figure out who murdered her. I looked at the case for nearly 10 years before solving this 130-year-old murder mystery. I think you're going to be interested in her life, her death, and the investigation. And so please give that some thought. And then before we get back to the Stockton serial killer case, also consider picking up Deceived, an investigative memoir of the Zion Society cult. Deceived chronicles my investigation into a ritual cult that was abusing children. We were able to rescue 32 kids who suffered more than 4,000, get that, 4,000 counts of sexual assault and rape. The story isn't disgusting. We keep it really high level, but we do call it out like it is. The story chronicles my investigation, but more importantly, it chronicles how I came to reacquaint myself with these victims 30 years later. They reached out to me and wanted to know more about what happened. And more importantly, they wanted me to tell their story, and that's why I wrote this book. Now, the most important thing for you to know about the book is that we're not getting the proceeds on it. We've decided that all of the proceeds from Deceived are going to go to build a new children's justice center, and it's breaking ground in January. So thanks to all of you who have picked up the book. We're also using it to pay for law enforcement training for police officers that are looking into sexual assault. Now, you can find both books at Amazon, or you can get hardbound copies, even signed if you want, at profilingevil.com. Now, let's get back to this investigation into the Stockton serial killer. You know, it would take approximately 15 months before this killer would strike again. And keep in mind, there were only a few days between some of these attacks toward the end. But this guy, at first, 6 days between his first and second attack. And then he didn't strike for 448 days. And before we go too far into the weeds, keep in mind this predator had transferred from Oakland over to Stockton. It's about 50 to 60 miles, an hour drive. Now, this entire thing left me scratching my head with two primary questions on my mind. First, why on earth did this predator stop killing for 448 days? I mean, was it because he was feeling this intense remorse? I don't believe that. Did he move entirely to a different part of the state of California, or did he move somewhere else in the United States or even further away? He was gone for more than a year. Or is it possible that this offender could have ended up in a mental health facility or a correctional institution during that period of time? But this we know for sure. He didn't do anything that we're aware of for 448 days. And how likely is that to you? These are questions that law enforcement undoubtedly is prying into. And they're going to be looking at things like probation and parole records and other information to get as much insight into this as they can. Because remember, over a year, 448 days passed before he shoots and kills again. Well, that happened on July 8th, 2022 at 12:31 in the morning. 35-year-old Paul Yaw was fatally shot in the 5600 block of Kermit Lane, where police found the man with multiple gunshot wounds. First responders were able to keep him alive for a short period of time, but he died at the hospital. It would be 34 days until August 11th at 9:49 p.m. when 43-year-old Salvador Debuti Jr., and I hope I got his name right to the family, he was shot and killed. Responding officers actually found the man suffering multiple gunshot wounds. He was in a fast food parking lot. Before he could be stabilized, he died at the scene. 19 days later, the killer claimed his next victim. It was August 30th at 6:41 a.m. when, this is the outlier, 21-year-old Jonathan Hernandez Rodriguez was shot and killed. His body was discovered inside of a car at an apartment complex, and he was pronounced dead at the scene. 22 days later, a 52-year-old man named Juan Cruz was fatally shot. It was September 21st, 2022, and it was 4:27 a.m. You see in the pattern here, this guy is getting out in the early morning hours. Is he working, or is he just sleeping all day and then doing his murders at night? Now, Cruz was shot on the sidewalk between a car and the fence of an apartment complex. Again, like the others, he was pronounced dead at the scene, but this time, police have CCTV camera footage of the person they believe is responsible. Let's watch that video and pay close attention to the individual's build, and as the chief of police said, the way in which he walks. And then, just 6 days later, the killer struck again on September 27th, 2022. It was 1:53 a.m. when 911 calls came in of shots fired on Porter Avenue. When police arrived, they found 54-year-old Lawrence Lopez lying on the sidewalk with gunshot wounds. Like the others, he died at the scene. Now, police are asking anybody with information to call the Crime Stoppers number at 209-946-0600. Now think about that. The last murder we know about was September 27th, 2022. So I want to stop a minute there and bring the map back in and just kind of reestablish the route that was taken on these murders. So as we go over there, I'm going to pop back in here. After Natasha Latour, the next victim was Paul Yaw. Victim number 4 was Salvador. 5, Jonathan. 6, Juan. And Lawrence number 7. So kind of interesting as we look at this. I'm going to see if I can zoom in a little bit on that. Well, that's good enough while we talk about this. The thing that I think is really interesting here is there is a lot of discussion going on about the pattern. And oftentimes patterns become really important. Again, geography matters, and it is so important to geographically profile this offender as well. Now, the only patterns that people are coming up with are kind of interesting. Is it possible that he is working on right-hand turns, victim number 1 or number 2 to victim number 3, right-hand turn, victim number 4 and 5, 6, and then a right-hand turn? You could go 1,000 different directions trying to come up with whatever this means. But it's interesting because what we're going to find when this thing is finally solved is, while the pattern doesn't make sense to us, it makes perfect sense to these predators. It's something I learned from Dr. Fred Cowie when we were looking at the Unabomber case. Fred said over and over again that while it may not make sense to us, it makes perfect sense to the predator. And so that's what we've got to kind of work toward and bank on. Let's take a minute, look and see if there are any specific questions that jump out that maybe we ought to talk about. I like some of these comments, though. Be watchful of your surroundings. Yeah, we really do have to be very aware, don't we? Let's see. He definitely doesn't look on the older side, like in his 50s or 60s, probably 20s through 30s. Yeah, how many of you kind of find it interesting, again, as you think about the victim demographic, the potential of the predator, what their race and background might be? I find the holding the gun like a gangster to be interesting. Those kinds of things all kind of help you. I think this is an interesting comment. Judy says, I think he walks like he has a prosthetic left leg, or at least an injury on that leg, doesn't he? He keeps that a little bit stiffer and straighter. But think about that. Boy, you'd have to be in tip-top shape to go out and be committing murders. So that would be interesting. These are interesting questions, Margaret. What time are the bars closing and law enforcement shift changes? The law enforcement shift change probably isn't playing into this as much as what the law enforcement patrol patterns might be. And it's always possible that they might be using those to their best advantage. So let's see. Angela noticed that his left leg and foot turn outward when he walks. This is an interesting comment. Betty has an upright body while walking. And I think those are the kinds of things that the chief was trying to bring out. Again, what time of year does he kill? Well, he's been ramped up since July. So we've seen 5 murders since July. So summer months, and he's wearing a sweatshirt in Stockton at night, which is kind of interesting too. I haven't looked at what the nighttime temperatures are. Maybe any of you living in Stockton can tell us what the temperature in Stockton is at 3 o'clock in the morning. And then you got to look at who might be wearing, again, a long sleeve sweatshirt in the summertime. Let's see. So the question here, is he escalating? Well, he's escalating in the amount of time between each event, but now all of a sudden we see him stopping, and I guess somebody thinks that I'm the guy in the video. So thank you, Kathy Q. I've not been called skinny, I think, since I was back on the SWAT team. So that's very nice of you, and I wasn't skinny then either. Let's see. A question from Rose. Do you think he could be wearing a brace or something? Gosh, yeah, those are all possibilities that we have to consider and look at. Here, Melanie says his gait looks like he's strutting, like he's proud of what he accomplished. Interesting again, yeah. These are all really great comments, and thank you. And hey, folks, thanks for those of you who have been doing some super chats and stuff. That is really helpful. Let's jump back into this video now and talk a little more, because now I'm starting to look a little more at some of those several weeks since that happened. As I've studied this case, my mind has gone back to the case of Richard Ramirez, the Night Stalker. And some of you have watched my interviews about Richard and my lasagna dinners at San Quentin with him. But I remember Ramirez saying that the publicity and the intimate details of the case that were shared by the media enabled him to keep at arm's length from police. So here's my question. Are people, true crime, the media, sharing way too much information? And are they making it easier for predators like Ramirez, or now the Stockton serial killer, to avoid detection and stay on the lam? This is leaving me tossed between the pros and cons of the true crime community and the media attention that cases like this garner. And that's where I want to leave today's question for all of you. Do you think in some cases we're sharing way too much information online and in the press? especially in cases like this that are ongoing, not something that happened and we're learning more as this thing prepares for court. So I want to stop there for a minute. I want to just read some comments to see how you feel. I specifically thought of Ramirez as I was watching some of the behavioral changes in this particular predator. Again, it's been now close to 3 weeks since his last murder. He was escalating. It was happening more and more regularly. Did he go back to jail for something? Was he picked up on a thing that threw him in jail for a few weeks? Or was the pressure getting too much and he moved on to a different area? And if so, does that mean that the killing stopped, or did the killing just start happening somewhere else? And this is one of the problems we have. We call it the 3 C's: cooperation, communication, and coordination, where agencies don't share enough information. But nowadays, through alcohol, tobacco, and firearms, we have NIBRS, that National Incident-Based Reporting System, and the gun database that allows us to look at forensics on weapons. So hopefully that's interesting and is going to bring cases together. So yeah, Bambi says, yeah, I think it's too much, but I can't help watching. Yeah, it's like you don't know how many times I learned something that I think is really powerful and cool, and I'd love to share it, including, like I mentioned, on Dr. Phil episodes that I've done, where it just is better to give it to law enforcement and allow them to hold on to it and sit on it. And that really frustrates a lot of people that it's not being shared more readily, but it's the right thing. Let's see. My gut says law enforcement shouldn't have released it. It was the same gun, as he might change weapons. Yeah. So interestingly, that's exactly what Ramirez did. He threw evidence off of the San Francisco Bridge when he heard Dianne Feinstein talking about it in the media. So yeah, those are really interesting challenges that come up. Let's see. Wishing B says he's killing his symbolic father figures. Here we go. Leslie says yes and yes. Maui Swift, great to see you. The armchair detectives get a lot out of control. It's kind of difficult because we sure love to spin a theory, don't we? So yeah, these, you're all kind of weighing in with something that is kind of troubling me. Let's continue. But let's think about a serial killer case like this, a serial predation case where the offender could be learning what police know and changing their modus operandi or their signature in order to avoid detection. I hope you'll enter your thoughts down below and take time to read each other's comments. Make sure you're responding to each other and having some dialogue, and know that I'm going to be reading them and responding as well. I want to personally thank those of you who have joined Profiling Evil's membership programs. And to those of you who subscribe, whether you can afford a financial contribution or not, I got to stop right there. And Zazara, my parents were killed by RR. Is that Robert Rhodes? And folks, if you haven't looked into Robert Ben Rhodes, a predatory serial truck driver, go to my Mapping Evil with Mike King podcast, and you can learn more about Robert Ben Rhodes. Or here on Profiling Evil, look in the content list for Robert Ben Rhodes. This is a serial killer that some investigators believe killed as many as 300 people during his reign of terror. An individual who I had the privilege of interviewing, and I only say that because it was the first glimpse into a real devil that I've ever seen in regard to his murders, sitting in prison now for the rest of his life. So in Zazara, my deepest apologies, and I'm going to look in here and see if you respond back that it actually is Robert Ben Rhodes that you're talking about. You're saying Richard Ramirez. I'm sorry, that's actually who you're talking about. Yeah, I'll tell you, Richard Ramirez, one of the strangest interviews I've ever done, and I didn't know that. And please email me offline at profilingevil@gmail.com. I'd love to learn more about that, and again, express my appreciation that you would share that. I spent a lot of time with Ramirez in San Quentin talking about murder. So sadly, let's get back to this. The fact that you're subscribing and being a part of our team here is really helpful to us. When you say you like something, it helps move us up in the YouTube algorithm. Please help us out. Hit the like for those of you who are contributing financially. Some of those you help us continue to roll out. So thanks to all of you who are helping. I hope you like what you're seeing. That's really nice. My favorite is obviously the Academy. It's a place where you and I can get together and explore criminal behavior and the criminal investigative process. I hope you'll consider them. But again, for those of you who are not in a position financially, don't sweat it. If you find that you do have enough for a one-time donation, down for the day, let's look at some of the PayPal that you've got. I'm going to take and try to read some while this thing kind of hit that like and subscribe button. Ring the bell so that you get all of our notifications. Remember that you can find Profiling Evil on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And if you like podcasts, folks, check out Profiling Evil on your favorite podcast platform. If you're in Southeast Asia, go to Mapping Evil with Mike King. And by the way, know that I'm heading out of town to the Dallas area for the International Chiefs of Police. Stop all that yammering and just tell you all thank you so much for all of your support of Profiling Evil. I really appreciate it. Let's just see if there are any last questions that come in the last couple of minutes. If not, just kind of watch. I've got a video coming out on Friday in regard to an Adventures with Purpose case that I've been working with them on. Hopefully you caught the one today and the one last week. And I don't know if any of you caught one of my most exciting videos, the pond rake. But go check out how I cleared the weeds, those predatory weeds out of my pond up at the mountain cabin. And to all of you, I really appreciate all your support. And the question really that I think you guys are asking, and I don't know the answer to, is why did he stop after he was escalating? The Stockton serial killer. He was escalating. He was down to 6 days between the last murder and the one before that. And now he's gone nearly 3 weeks. And why? Was it because of publicity? Was it because he was arrested for something else? Did he get sent away for some other reason or get a job? But I don't believe for a moment that he got a conscience and decided not to kill again. So, folks, be safe. Watch the Victim Risk Continuum. And thanks for all your support of Profiling Evil. We'll see you on the next one.